So something that you'll see come up time and time again is something called a tag manager. Now, I focused very much on Google Tag Manager in this instance, but there are other companies that offer tag management systems too. A tag manager is used to segment code provided by third parties, analytics, marketing, products. Really, the Cloudflare app system is a very fancy tag manager because what they're doing is deploying tags for these third party products, but doing it in a way that allows you to augment or customize the product in a non-technical way. They're really good for supporting vendors that are doing exciting things but maybe don't have the facility to work with you directly to propagate their technology as well. Hi, Ellie. Hope you're well.
Hello.
If you have any questions, Ellie, drop them in the chat. I'll pick them up as soon as I can.
Okay.
So I've now lost that focus. So the next thing a tag manager does is you no longer sort of need to manually add this code, and you no longer need to consider how that code's triggered. So you just configure and publish them in a GUI. Now, as it happens, a couple of weeks ago, Cloudflare, it's in beta. So I'm going to show you it in Cloudflare, but just be aware that it's a beta product where Google Tag Manager has been around for some years and it's quite mature. So when I was showing you apps, they were very much things that just appear on the website or possibly do something in the background. You may not want these things to always be there. You may want them to be triggered by a click or some other interaction, or you may perhaps want to delay when they're loaded. The terminology will vary from one thing to another, but in Cloudflare, they call their tag manager Zaraz. I have no idea why. But it's really simple. You basically get some code, and in fact, will this let me edit the code? I'll start a new one, that's fine, I think. So they call them tools. They have pre-existing tools for lots of things. So if you want to quickly deploy Google Analytics without dealing with any code at all, they'll actually let you do this in a sort of one-click fashion. Again, they've got hundreds. I can't go through all of them, but if you want to deploy a Twitter pixel, Facebook pixel, Pinterest pixel, it's probably in here. What you'll see quite often is custom HTML. So this is where a developer or a third-party tool that you've signed up for will say, we need you to do this to integrate with our product. You can do it via some custom HTML. So all you would do is add a field for it, call it HTML code, click add, paste the code in and hit save. This is actually on a website that I don't want to mess with, so I'm not going to sort of demonstrate that, but it's really that simple. The next thing you can do is decide if you want it to be triggered. So at the moment, this custom HTML is just going to load every time a page on the website does. You can create custom triggers that match rules. Now, this is where things get borderline developer-y because you need to understand what a click listener is, although I think it's fairly self-explanatory. It's listening for a click. Form submissions, timers. You can spend some time experimenting with these things to sort of understand them, but it's whether you want to be spending time on this or your core business. And you can listen for variables, so certain things that exist in the page, whether it contains something very vague or something very specific, whether it matches something, and you can get very granular in terms of how that is deployed. Now, I've kind of stayed on the UX UI augmentation with that, but it's also about how you measure things. So for example, if there's a button on your website that you want to track a click on, you'd be able to do this with Google Analytics, which we can go into shortly. Okay. So I think we'll come back to Hotjar. Hiya, Ismay, go for it.
So I'm having an issue at the moment with Facebook picking up the images from my website, my product images as catalogue. And after a lot of consultation with Facebook and with the plugin that's sitting on the website that communicates between the two, it's something to do with the open graphic images or something.
Sure.
The latest stage I've got to is saying I need to change some code. Would I be able to use that? Do that or not?
I don't know of a specific Cloudflare app, but it's feasible. Cloudflare operates at a level where it could change basically open graph tags. You can think of them as being HTML tags that don't render for the end user, but Facebook scrapes them. If you want to drop me an email, I can look into the problem a bit more in depth, because it's surprisingly tricky to get Facebook to see these images under certain circumstances. They also cache the life out of them. Did they send you the debugger tool that allows you to manually purge their cache? Have they brought that up at all?
No, they can't. They left it as it's something to do with microdata, and so then that kind of led me to deal with the plugin people rather than Facebook themselves.
Okay, but by all means, drop me an email and I'll see what I can sort of offer in terms of support. There are some tools that they don't make very well known for some reason that can help if you're just trying to debug and test this stuff as well, because quite often you can fix it, but there's a 2-week lag where Facebook's cached the old result and you don't realize that your fix is actually working. So I'll see how I can help with that. So just a question in from Sarah: have you used the new buy button feature on Shopify? Could I use Zaraz to monitor the use of that? So I haven't used that myself, no, but I don't see any reason why not. Usually a button click, I'll cover this very quickly. So if I go to one of the websites I'm going to get to shortly, you need to understand or know how to point out the button on the page. And this is usually done by something called a CSS selector. So depending on your web browser, you can, again, email me and I can get you this if you can't find it yourself. I have something called developer tools turned on for obvious reasons, and I'm able via the browser to do something called inspect element. So I right click on it. You can see it's kind of highlighting it. Looks like you might be familiar with this, and it shows me where it lives in the code. Now, if I right click it in the code, I can then copy its selector path, and that looks like usually garbage. Oh, in this case, it's very, very short actually. So it's the hash RSVP thing that you can see. I'm not sure if it's showing you that actually. Can you see a pop-up window with some, it's the contents of my clipboard. Yeah, my screen's really large. So if I wanted to target that button, that is the identifier for it in code. And that's what I would give to Zaraz or Google Tag Manager or whatever it is.
That's what I was struggling with. Which bit
yes.
to Google Analytics, because that's what we're using.
Sure. So it can be tricky, and depending on how the platform you're using or the content management system or the person that's coded your website, that can be ambiguous. So I would just say test it. In this case, the hash mark denotes that this element is completely unique with that name in the page. So I'm highly confident it would just work. There's other less ambiguous paths. So you just sort of, need to test and be aware of that. Okay, any other questions? Marvelous. Okay, cool. Right, so getting down to actually measuring stuff and how to interpret some of these measurements is quite tricky. So I'm going to start with the page performance stuff that we covered during the first session or the first half of this session, depending how you want to look at it. So understanding page speed performance is fairly technical, but there's some aspects that once you know a little bit of jargon are fairly easy to perceive. So I briefly showed you guys Google Page Speed Insights. This is also known as Google Lighthouse. So this is Google trying to be transparent without giving too much away about how they technically crawl your website. It's a completely free tool. Again, it will be linked to from the presentation, which you should get a copy of. And you can literally just put your website address in it, hit analyze. It will take 20, 30 seconds and come back with a result. Be warned that they'll cache the result. So if you change things and go and scan the website again, you might not get the freshest result. Give it 20, 30 seconds, because I'm sure they've had people try to abuse this and resell the data, basically. So I'll take you through a couple of other tools, and then we'll come back in terms of how I decide what's really important. So if we look at Page Speed Insights, we can see that this site allegedly has quite a few problems on mobile. Performance is around 54, not as high as I would like to see it. And then it tells us about opportunities: reduce the amount of JavaScript, reduce the initial server response time. I happen to know this isn't on a great host, and it's also not running Cloudflare. And I need to reduce some of the CSS. Now, the problem with some of these is that what they don't tell you is that if we reduce the initial server response time, it's quite likely it would resolve the unused JavaScript and the unused CSS, because if they're loading fast enough, it will stop caring that they're unused, quite frankly. So it really all comes down to code it well and deliver it as quickly as possible, which is why a decent host and Cloudflare can be really, really helpful. The one that's trickiest to deal with is reducing the impact of third-party code. So this is not even a warning, really, because at the end of the day, Google Analytics is third-party code. And believe it or not, this tool will complain if you're using Google Analytics. So this is where, or YouTube videos or anything like that. So just bear in mind that they don't really eat their own dog food here or produce stuff that is necessarily optimized for your website. It's usually the opportunities that you want to be looking for in page speed insights. Now, this is quite a techie tool, but hopefully you can see that, reduce unused JavaScript. That's pretty easy to interpret. I need to try and shave some of the JavaScript I'm not using out of the website. The other two tools I really like are provided by a company called Pingdom. So as an aside, Pingdom offer a great service where they essentially monitor your website. I believe there's a free tier. I haven't used it in a while. But they're called Pingdom because what they used to do historically was ping your website. That's a shame. I don't think they offer a free tier anymore. But if you have concerns about your website's uptime, these guys will essentially ping it from different servers round the clock around the world and send you an email if they detect that it's down for some reason. But their page speed tool has a really great feature that unfortunately Lightspeed doesn't, and GTmetrix, the next tool I'll show you, doesn't either. And it lets you decide where the website's being tested from. So ideally, we'd love our website to be performant, everywhere in the world. But ultimately, you're going to know where your audience are, and it will be 2, 3, maybe 4 countries or regions. So you can set where the test is run from, and you will notice the results will be slightly different depending on region, and some of it will just be affected by that country's networks and stuff. There's not necessarily anything you can do on your website. So what I look for here is the overall grade. So I sort of trust this. I always feel like it's quite close to my user experience. So I can see that I've got a B, which is great. A star's always better, but B is decent. I can see that they're telling me my website's nearly 2 megabytes. Now that's not huge, but it's not ideal. Like really, we should be trying to come in at about 0.5 megabyte if we can. And we can see that the site's loading in under 2 seconds. Now, the golden metric for page load time is around a second. This can be tricky. I wouldn't get too hung up on it, and it's likely to go down if you just reduce the page's overall size. So again, this is about crunching down things like images, not having too much bloated JavaScript and that kind of thing. So for me, this corroborates what Lightspeed's telling me, because Lightspeed's telling me you've got some extra CSS, you've got some extra JavaScript. This is saying my page is a bit big. Interestingly, Google didn't think my page was too big, but I'm now thinking along the lines of, okay, I need to start thinking about the size of the page that I'm delivering. These guys are suggesting I implement something called gzip. It's a little bit too technical to get into that, but it's something that your host should be able to turn on for you. So if you see something about gzip, just speak to your host. Expires headers, I'm going to call a false positive because 9 times out of 10 they are. These are what tell the browser when to get a fresh copy of the website or the code. Now, in some instances, you always want the fresh copy for the user. For example, if it's a checkout page, you want them to not get what's on their hard drive. You want what's in their cart from your server definitively. The other thing is those expires headers can come from third party. It doesn't unfortunately go into it here, but for example, Google Analytics will explicitly say, do not cache me under any circumstances, because if you were to cache, you'd be missing page hits and your metrics would be meaningless. So just be aware that some of these things, it's just the way it's going to be. It may skew the scoring, but in the real world, it's unlikely to have a significant impact. The next tool I'm going to look at, unfortunately, this has become a little bit of a premium tool. They still do give you a lot, but you do have to pay to get the sort of stuff that I used to use this for. So this is a platform called GT Metrics. Sadly, they've taken away the ability for you to scan a website from a chosen location. They just pick where they have availability and give you a service. And in this instance, it's scanning from Vancouver. Now, I can just take that into account, really, as I'm looking at this. So we can see similar kind of score to GT Metrics' grade. The interesting metric here that I think we get with page speed as well, they may call it something else. No, they don't. Okay. There's something called largest contentful paint. So this is an overly technical term for how long it takes before they perceive the website to be fully interactive. Excuse me. So at the moment, this website's taking about 2 seconds before someone can tap on it, swipe, click on a link, interact with it, that kind of thing. That's a really important metric, and it's something that GT Metrics is pretty good at ascertaining. So unfortunately, without digging in, we don't necessarily know why that is, but by looking at the top issues, we can see that, again, a third company here is saying that our initial server response time is poor. So we need to look at our hosting. We need to look at maybe using something like Cloudflare to reduce that load time. That is going to impact our largest contentful paint, because the sooner we get the content there, the sooner the page becomes interactive, essentially. These guys are slightly more honest about the impact of third-party tools. So it's suggesting that we lazy load third-party resources with facades. So this page has a Vimeo video on it, and they've gone, we get that you want a Vimeo video on your page. There's better ways of loading it. But they've also gone, hey, we get it. It's not your fault that Vimeo or YouTube aren't optimized. And my suspicion is YouTube knows this as well and factor that into their page rankings and that sort of thing. Slightly more detail with GT Metrics as well in terms of what is making up this page size. So my suspicion was images, frankly, from experience, 9 times out of 10. 90% of the page size is image. We can see that nearly a megabyte of my 1.9 or 1.7 megabytes is images. So there's a massive easy win there by either turning image compression on at Cloudflare or just re-uploading the existing images better compressed. For those of you that are using graphics editing packages, Photoshop, GIMP, and Pixelmator, these all have export for web functions, and they are super simple. There's a quality versus size slider. So just find the sweet spot where you can bring the size down as much as you can without compromising the image. If you have the ability to upload separate images for desktop, tablet, and mobile, it's always worth taking the time to do that as well. So even a well-optimized desktop image, if you load it on a phone, if you think about it, phones are a different aspect ratio. They're portrait, whereas most desktops and laptops and most tablets are used in landscape orientation. Your developer can help with this as well, but it's pretty easy if you have the time to invest. So there's a ton of other tools that you can pay quite a lot of money for, really, or you can invest further into the upper tier of some of these. Mine comes up as a D with most of the image sizes 3.3. Oh, it's JS. Interesting. That is so. Ismay's just commented she's run her own site through this tool, and it's come up as a D. Which was it? GT Metrics, Ismay, or Pingdom, or
GT Metrics?
GT Metrics. Yeah. So, which location did they assign you to? Can you tell?
Vancouver.
Vancouver. It seems to be their default for whatever. They must have the most compute resource there. Cool. Out of interest, what does your cumulative layout shift say?
0.01.
Okay, that's not bad by any means, but it suggests that some of that JavaScript is augmenting the look of the website. So your HTML is not doing everything it possibly could be to lay the site out before the JavaScript is then loaded and adjusts it. That's what's called cumulative layout shift. So sometimes when you see a website load, you kind of get this little shudder. It doesn't necessarily bother anyone, but you don't just get a web page. You kind of get bits loading up or whatever. That can be called cumulative layout shift. It's not always a negative thing either. It's more just be aware of it. And if it shouldn't be happening as far as you're aware, then you can look into it. Okay, brilliant. From a technical perspective, that's probably as much as you want to be doing. There's lots of stuff we as developers do to dig into this stuff. But have you guys got any sort of further questions, concerns? Is there anything happening on your existing websites that you'd like to sort of discuss or anything? All good? Oh, go on, Ismay.
I wouldn't. I had major problems with the developers who set up my site, and I ended up redesigning most of it myself. They were rubbish. And they started out using a Divi builder, and then
that's why your JavaScript's monstrous. Yes, okay.
And then they added in Elementor, and then I was told actually it's better to just use the basic editor. So it's definitely going to be worth me trying to remake those pages just in the basic block editor, isn't it, and get rid of Divi and Elementor.
It's probably a conversation to have offline. So for everyone else's benefit, Divi and Elementor in your life cycles of developing websites for your business, I would be surprised if you escape the names of these. These are page builders. So they give WordPress users a Squarespace style experience, being able to drag and drop and build a website. They're phenomenal tools. They are very good, but the problem with a tool like this is that it can't anticipate exactly what the end user is going to use. So they have a habit of just loading everything and going, use what the end user sort of configured, but here's everything just in case. So this is how you end up with so bearing in mind, most JavaScript files come in at kilobytes. So to have 3.5 megabytes is monstrous. Now, with that said, Divi and Elementor have a bad rap because of this. They can be optimized. It's absolutely possible to have, I've built Divi websites actually that have 90+% performance scores. So there's benefits to the block editor, there's benefits to page builders. Ultimately, I think you just have to decide if you're at a point where you're still quite fluid in terms of what you're doing with your website, this is just the penalty. And it's short term and you're okay to accept that. When the site's kind of settled down and you're finding that you're building less new layouts or augmenting that layout, that's where it's worth talking to a developer about optimizing it. Because there's lots that they can take out once the page builders don't have to sort of guess what you might need. So this is where reducing plugins, running stuff like Cloudflare, which can compress Elementor, output code so it's smaller, that kind of thing can help. It's a real minefield. It's quite complex. Ultimately, it's better to have a hand-coded WordPress theme, but that massively limits you as the business owner if you want to be proactive in terms of building the site out. So it's always a balancing act. Does that make sense? Appreciate it's a lot to take in. I do it every day and I'm still figuring stuff out with it myself. So. Okay, brilliant. So that really covers performance metrics. Now, is everybody using Google Analytics? I appreciate there's lots of people here that are muted that may not want to participate. Is anyone not using Google Analytics, or does anyone not know what Google Analytics is?
Yes.
I'm going to take... Oh, lovely. Was that Krishna?
Yes.
Hi, Krishna. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm good.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Okay, so for the benefit of Krishna, if I have time, I will pull up Google Analytics and do a little baptism of fire sort of tour through it.
Okay.
Google Analytics is a free product. It's a JavaScript tag that you can deploy via a tag manager or just paste it into your website. And it tracks the number of visitors you've got. It can track button clicks. Using GA had it active for 1 week and it just started. Okay, thanks, Sarah. That's good to know. It's an immensely powerful product. It's a little bit overwhelming when you log in and look at the number of things you can do, but 100% install it. It's really the industry leader in terms of website analytics. I'm going to cover some other things here as well. But if you're getting to the point where you're working with a marketing agency, one of the top 3 things I'll say is, can we have access to your Google Analytics? Because there's some very important insights there. I'll try and give you a quick tour of that, Sarah. It sounds like you benefit from some good places to kind of look at within its dashboard, possibly Ismay as well. Does that help, Krishna? Do you understand that?
Yes, yeah. It really
Lovely.
helped.
That's good to know. Okay, so I'll come to Google Analytics in a bit because I think everybody appreciates the fact that they need a number. They need to know how many people hit their website a day, how many convert. But what you don't get from Google Analytics, at least not very easily, is why people leave, or why they aren't staying, or why they aren't achieving that goal that you're looking for. So Google's really good at identifying your bounce rate and how many people are bouncing and how long or short the visit of the site is. But it's a little bit tricky to understand why those things are happening. So firstly, we're going to be looking at a product called Hotjar. Sadly, I can't fully demonstrate this to you because the data just takes too long to sort of aggregate. But if you visit hotjar.com, you can have a look and a read around. Hotjar is one of the coolest products that I've seen emerge in the last few years. And it's the closest thing that we will ever get to literally sitting on the shoulder of a stranger using our website or web application. So Hotjar is a JavaScript tag that you can implement on your website, and it literally records the screens of your end users. Now, I appreciate how creepy that sounds, but it's done in a completely anonymized way, to the extent where if you have text input fields, they blur the inputs so that you can't fish for things like phone numbers, credit card numbers, addresses, and that kind of thing. But it literally does a screen recording of how that user is interacting with your website, to the extent that it also tracks the mouse movement. Now, what's really surprising is the number of people that read a website by taking the mouse. Does Zoom show you my cursor? Can you see this waving around? Yeah, great. So a lot of people, while they're reading, they will take the cursor across the text they're reading. And if they're interested in something, they'll hover, they'll go back and forth on a button while they're mulling over whether they should click on it. There's also little interesting isms that people have. And Hotjar just captures all of these. It's not hard numbers like Google Analytics. So you're not always going to be able to 100% explain some of the behaviors that you see. But some really good examples I have of this, and this is actually a business I built myself over the lockdown period. We essentially created a platform that works like Zoom for musicians. So you can't currently use Zoom to create music because there's a delay in the audio. So we built a platform where there is basically, it minimizes the delay and musicians can rehearse. We built a beautiful website, at least I think it's beautiful. And we just weren't getting people, we were seeing hits in Google Analytics, but we just weren't getting people hitting this button, essentially. The reason being that our visitors were using much smaller screen sizes than we had anticipated. And this button was appearing what's called under the fold. So users had to scroll to see it. The page layout's changed somewhat since then. Hopefully it's pretty obvious. We've got a big book now button and a big try it for free button. And our conversions have changed. But what we saw was dozens of people getting to the website and never scrolling. There was no indication in our design language that there was anything more to read because we'd succinctly framed everything above the fold. And people were digging around in the navigation and getting confused and just dumping the website. We had a really high bounce rate. So Hotjar, we were literally able to watch for free 35 users. It will record 35 sessions a day for you. I'll take you to the pricing page so you can get some insights for this as well. This isn't something you necessarily want to install straight away. I would start with your website with Google Analytics and see how you get on. And if you've got a real question that you just can't get a clear answer from Google Analytics, this is a wonderful product to literally see how people are interacting with your website. We've used it for clients as well, and we've seen how lengthy checkout processes or little annoyances that we thought might be pleasing in the user experience actually just put people off because it confused them. I've never come across anything other than a UX consultant who at the end of the day is only really guessing. They're guessing with lots of experience, but it's not quite as factual as seeing it. If you have 30 people on your website and they're not checking out after a pop-up or not seeing a button, you can literally see it happen here. Very simple product to implement and initially use, but there's a huge amount of depth in terms of what you can do with it as well. Again, we're quite tight for time, so I can't give you too much of a guided tour, but sign up, try it out. It's free. It's wonderful. One thing to bear in mind is there is a tiny performance hit. If you think about the fact that, I should say they're not recording the entire screen, they're just recording the website. But that can be quite processor intensive. So we tend to use it, turn it on, capture data for say a month, turn it off, address the problem, and then switch it back on. Slightly more expensive rather than paying yearly, because we essentially go to the monthly package for that. But we just don't need it running while we're addressing the problem. There may be certain instances where that's useful, but I think it's more efficient to run it when you're actually trying to figure something out and then see if what you've done has fixed the issue. Any questions around Hotjar? No, that's cool. If they come up later, by all means, ask them. Sadly, you can't deploy this via Cloudflare app, so I was really hoping you could, but you can't. I think that's it for that. Lovely. Okay. The next thing that I want to come on to is something that even really big businesses acknowledge, and it's the power of word of mouth. So you have this slightly pseudo metric where actually the offline world is having an impact on your online world. Word of mouth, despite the sort of speed and general convenience of the internet, is still an enormous factor in the digital world. In fact, it's probably accelerated by it. People share on social networks via iMessage and all this kind of stuff. And sometimes you don't know why this is happening. You might actually end up with someone on your website who's quite a large blogger or has shared it into some sort of private channel at work, and you'll see a big uptick in Google Analytics. But Google Analytics can't tell you where the traffic's come from. If it's a blog or something like that, you'll see the web address. I can show you it if we have time. And you can figure out that, oh, hey, we've got a blogger that loves us and they're really popular and driving traffic. Sometimes it can be more subtle. And sometimes you actually may want to incentivize this behavior. You want people to blog about you. You want people to refer your products and services if people are happy. So you'll have seen them and experienced them, I'm sure. And it's referral marketing campaigns or tell a friend campaigns, they're quite often known as. So these work for B2B relationships as well. So if you are at things like, gosh, the words escaped me, trade shows, or if you're giving presentations, you can see an uptick in traffic that's just come from people who've been sat in the room and then told people who weren't in the room about this great product and service or person that they've seen, and you can't attribute it to anything. What these referral platforms or technologies, we're looking at Referral Candy today. Referral Candy and I think a company called Mention Me are probably the top two for this product. And what these guys can do is essentially create unique URLs. So I could generate a link that was unique to Ismay and a link unique to Sarah and one unique to Barv. And I could then see how many clicks their link is generating. So you might have seen something similar with URL shorteners. That's really sort of powerful. If you're doing any sort of social media marketing or social media outreach, being able to generate these links and give it to this person are really important. Now, where Referral Candy and Mention Me differ from URL shorteners is that they also have a tracking pixel that you can put pretty much anywhere on your website to see if this person is not just driving traffic, but if that traffic converts. And they'll also provide you all the tools you need to reward the end user. So for example, if I gave a link to Sarah and a friend of Sarah's clicked on it and bought something from my website, I could automate Sarah getting a £10 voucher or something like that. Just an example. It doesn't have to be monetary. It can be actually anything you want. So this can give you, if you've got a brick and mortar business, this can be a really powerful transitionary tool that helps you bolster your initial online presence, because you're taking what you've already succeeded to do in the real world and used it as a catalyst for going online. This kind of marketing doesn't work for everyone. I was a huge advocate of referral marketing. I really believe in people. I actually worked on the BT Tell a Friend campaign many, many years ago. It was almost like the adverts were almost like a TV series, like a sitcom. I forget the actors. It was a family thing. But I worked on that campaign and it was enormous for BT, and it sent shockwaves through the digital marketing industry. The truth is, not every product's interesting enough for this. Not every product is bought frequently enough for people to be talking about it. It's not at the forefront of their minds. The insurance industry tried it. It just doesn't work. People renew their car insurance once a year. It doesn't tend to sync up with when their friends and family are. However, things like clothes, lifestyle goods, they're the sort of thing that people are wearing. They go, oh, I love your shoes. Where did you get them? I love your glasses, whatever it is, curtains. So I think for a lot of you guys, this could be viable, but you should just think about if you're experiencing the sort of referral phenomenon within your own business. Are people already recommending you? Would they if they were incentivized? Referral can be fantastic. You do get a 30-day, I believe, let me double check this. You do get 30 days for free, and then it's $50 a month. It's not a huge amount of money, but actually you need to be seeing return on that. Whether that be monetary, an uptick in sales, or brand reach, you have to decide if it's worth that cost. One warning I would give you, that 30 days goes by really fast. So spend a lot of time thinking about how you're really going to get this in front of people before you launch it. Otherwise, you're going to take the 30 days and it will have disappeared and you'll be paying them before you even really know what you want to be doing with it. Okay, I think that covers the kind of referral marketing aspect. Is anyone doing refer a friend or incentivizing their existing clients to help spread the word about their services?
We've been working with Share a Sale and Anwin for affiliate marketing.
Ah, yes. So this is kind of like the next bracket down from affiliate marketing, I suppose. It makes your direct clients affiliates. Has it worked for you?
We've been more on the receiving end of it.
Sure.
So we do patterns every month for Love Sewing magazine. So we've been putting their affiliate link to sell back copies of the magazines in our blog posts.
Excellent, sure.
But I always felt a bit icky about doing it with like our bloggers, for instance, because it feels too corporate. Like Anwin is a very corporate setup, which is perfect for major national publishers and big business, but for smaller businesses it just feels a bit too corporate.
Yeah, it can be. So this can be a softer touch. It's a little bit more like, if you like what we do and you want to tell people, we'd love to reward you for it. So it can feel a bit less corporate, but it is also, it's a method that's definitely used by big corporations as well. I think Uber, Deliveroo, I feel like I see it all the time, but it can work. I just don't think it's as easy as some people sell it to be, but for the right demographic, it can be so powerful. I've experienced businesses that have just, their entire marketing budget is just this, pretty much. They've not needed to do things like Google AdWords or anything like that. They just use their existing customers. So one to just be aware of, if you're already in this sort of affiliate sectors, this is really just the sort of potentially a logical next step, I suppose. It depends on the business and how your affiliate marketing's gone.
Is it possible to add that link into a newsletter, say, for instance? So, like, people have been to a workshop with us and they've really enjoyed it. Can they have a link that's like, tell a friend about this, and then you get a return on it?
Absolutely, yeah. So Referral Candy, if I'm remembering correctly, have a direct MailChimp integration. So you can connect them and then they give you like a little code that you put in your newsletter. And whenever MailChimp churns through your list, it goes off and gets a link for that user. And it works really well. They do also have an API. So if you're not using MailChimp, you might be able to integrate with other people, but I've only experienced it with MailChimp. But yes, absolutely, that's doable.
Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions around referral marketing? Lovely. Okay, brilliant. I should also say Referral Candy have anti-fraud facilities because this kind of marketing can be rife with people creating false referrals and that sort of thing. But it can fill a real blind spot in terms of where is my website traffic coming from. Great. Okay, so we're down to the last 10 minutes. I'm going to assume, does anyone have anything more general they want to talk about, or any other questions? If not, I'll spend the last 10 minutes giving you a flyby tour of the analytics, both at Cloudflare and Google Analytics. No? Great. Okay. So first thing I would say is don't put all your ducks in one basket when it comes to analytics. They all have flaws. Google Analytics, as I sort of mentioned, is the industry standard, but they are sometimes a little bit slow with blocking bots that show up in your analytics. So sometimes you'll see a spike in traffic and actually it's bots. You think you've had some massive influx from a blog and it's just some guys in Russia that are trying to find websites with vulnerabilities in them. So I, again, harp on about it. What's wonderful about Cloudflare is that you get a very similar layer of analytics that will also tell you how many bots they've detected. Excuse me, I'll just let this load. So it's a little simpler. Let's go to a site that's actually getting some traffic. 1 second. Yeah, this should be a good one. So you can see that these are pretty basic. We've got a time period, unique visitors, total requests. This is where we start getting a little more into the world of Cloudflare. 50% of the traffic from the website was cached by Cloudflare systems. We get an idea of the amount of sort of file size we're transmitting. It's very kind of technical. However, if we go deeper, excuse me, we can see a country breakdown. I find this a lot friendlier than Google Analytics. For those of you that have dived into Google Analytics, which I'll do into a second, it can be a little bit intimidating. I get lost in it daily, despite using it daily. So you can see that this is perhaps the sort of thing that you might want to check in on once a month, just to get an idea of, if traffic is coming in from different locations and that kind of thing. You can also get a little bit of an insight into Cloudflare will fight off a monstrous attack on your website without ever actually telling you. So if I up this, I'd be very surprised if we don't see anything. So this particular website has had 11 threats that Cloudflare have detected in just the last 30 days. On higher traffic websites, I've seen this reach sort of thousands per day. And it's telling me the number of bots that have hit the site. So we can see that Facebook have hit this 9 times, Yandex 5, Google 4. It hasn't triggered something called rate limiting. So if they detect that a bot has hit the website and is trying to be malicious or perhaps trying to steal its content, they will kick something called rate limiting in to just slow it down, stop it affecting your server so much. It's all pretty simple to understand. Like, you might have to go off and read a little bit of their documentation, but it's all sort of pretty simple. Again, a bit more detail here. How much of the file size of my website is what's it coming from? So this is a fairly well built site. Most of it is just the HTML, then the JavaScript, then the CSS, and then unusually some images. So if you just want to keep an eye over how, if you're adding content to your site, you want a top level view rather than having to scan each of your pages through Lighthouse or Pingdom or whatever, this will give you a good top level, how's the entire website sort of performing view. I think most businesses are probably fine on these analytics. I'm sure an SEO guy might sort of tell me off for that, but I genuinely use this more than I do Google Analytics to just get a top level view of the amount of traffic over a period of time that I have. Any questions about that side of things in Cloudflare? Okay, let's get to the juicy stuff. Has anyone got any specific questions about Google Analytics? Because as you can probably see, there's a lot to take in. Has anyone been using it and just thinking, what does this mean? What should I care about?
Could you give us possibly like a top 5 things to check on a weekly basis? I know that's like a blog post in itself, but...
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, I mean, I can tell you the sort of things that I look at most regularly. So acquisition, in fact, they've moved some of these to what they believe to be the top level. So the first thing to bear in mind is they have a real-time panel, which is really cool if there are enough people sort of on a website to warrant it. So they've got real-time analytics, and then they've got sort of long-term trends. In fact, they've changed this again since the last time I logged in. So the stuff I tend to look at are, if I can find them, acquisition. So the things that tend to interest me are where my users are coming from. And then I sort of drill down to it. So I would start with user acquisition. Demographics very rarely has any sort of good information in it. So for example, if we look at the user acquisition channel, we can see that most people are visiting this website directly. So we know that we have a recurring user base. Our website is basically used as a portal that people log into to access a service. So the fact that people are direct shouldn't surprise me. Organic search is a nice thing to see high, because that means people are Googling for something relevant and finding us. And then what I start to like to look at is referral and organic social. So referrals, you'll have to dig into these. I'll try and squeeze that in at the end because time is incredibly tight. Referrals, I like to keep an eye on. This is basically where a link to your website exists somewhere else on the web, on the web, and is generating traffic for you. So if you see this climb to 1, or in fact, if it's a number greater than 0, you should be looking at it. You can drill, I'm not going to have time, unfortunately, to do it now, but you can drill right through to the specific web URL that is generating traffic. So with this one, mid-pandemic, we had a large chorus choir blog in Berlin, where we'd done no marketing. We just had a conductor who was very influential in the Berlin area, blogged about us and created an enormous spike. And we were actually able to find his website and email him. And we created an affiliate marketer out of him. Actually, he now advocates our platform. I've unbelievably run out of time, guys. I'm really sorry. You do have the opportunity to book anyone on the team, not just me, for a 2-hour slot. So if you do want a bit more of a deep dive into your own analytics, or any questions about turbocharging your digital presence, feel free. I'm available for those sorts of things. We'll close off with, has anyone got any questions? I know I've been asking every few minutes, but here's your last chance. All good? Go for it.
I don't know if you touched on influencer marketing. Sorry, I got disconnected for a bit. So
sure. Did
you touch on influencer marketing and what your views, if not?
Not really. I think someone else will be covering that, because it's not sort of within my relevant field as a technologist, I suppose. But referral candy is definitely a tool that you can leverage for influencer marketing. So were you here when I went through that?
No, I missed that completely. So
that's all right. So referral candy, I've literally got a minute. Is a system that I can do it a baptism of fire. Basically, go to their website and check it out. But it essentially allows you to generate unique URLs. You may have found other tools that do this within the sort of social marketing sphere that are a bit more specialized. But this allows you to track how much traffic a particular person generates to your website, if they've converted to a particular goal, and then it also automates the reward process. So if you had a deal with someone on social media and you said, listen, we'll pay you 100 quid if you get 50 people to check out on the website, you could use this tool pretty easily and with almost no technical knowledge to facilitate that and just automate the process.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. All right, guys, I'm going to love you and leave you at this point. Again, for anyone that needs it, my personal email address is crowe, CROWE, .zaid, ZAID, @gmail.com. I think Ben is going to be sending out a questionnaire about these, all of these sessions. It's been a really interesting experience, I think, for everyone on the team, because we meet such a broad range of businesses. We know we can't sort of please everyone, but we're doing our best to make sure everyone gets some value out of them. Your feedback in them would be super helpful for future sessions, just so we can sort of sharpen what we present and how we do it. So if you have time to fill it in, great. other than that, if no one's got any other questions, I think we're done for the day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Nice to meet you all. All the best.
Bye.
Bye.